Steve Ballmer moment.
That's right, your Steve Ballmer moment. So I hope that that sound will be okay for everybody, and if it isn't, if at any time, let us know. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Can you guys hear back there? You good? All right.
So those of you, how many people have been to a startup grind before? Okay. How many people have a startup, or founder, or startup? Okay. So this is therapy for startups. And how many people are investors? Right? So we get a few investors. How many people are, part of the ecosystem in another way? So they're, legal professionals, or they're part of the innovation ecosystem, somehow working for government or whatever the case may be. Right. Okay. So so there you go. There's your sound check.
Great.
If you've been here before, you know the kind of drill. We'd like to follow the themes of Startup Grind, which are to inspire, to educate, and to connect. So first, let's take a little trip down memory lane, or just we talked a little bit about your history, and maybe you can add on where you went to school and those kinds of things. But I think what we look for to kick off the talk is like where did this sort of entrepreneurial spark come from? Like, was it your dad or your mom, or was it was there somebody in particular, or was it a business person that you met along the way? What started you on Start?
So I think I mentioned this to you. I actually feel very uncomfortable with the label entrepreneur. I don't see myself as an entrepreneur. I never had a lemonade stand. I've never actually sold anything at profit other than Rypple. But I kind of see, I like solving problems. So where did I get the spark? I think spark originally came when I was at RIM.
Right.
So my history, I grew up in the Middle East. I was born in Dubai. Grew up there. I came here for school. I went to U of T. I did engineering science there. And the only reason I chose engineering science because they said it was hard, and Waterloo rejected me, so I went to engineering science instead because they said it was hard. That was the first time I had scotch as well. I got the rejection letter. I'm like, oh shit, I hate this shit. But,
which is why you got accepted the second time.
Exactly, we got accepted the second time. And then so after so fast forward 3 years of engineering, we have an internship program at U of T. I applied for a couple of jobs during my internship, and one of the jobs, job I really wanted, was at a company called Nortel. So I really, really wanted the Nortel job. It was in memory semiconductor design. I didn't get the job. My friend got the job, and I was desperate because I had.
Are you still friends with that person?
No. So I was desperate because it was internship. I had loans to pay, and I was like, shit, I need a job. There's this company called RIM. What the hell do they do? I don't know what they do. Where's Waterloo? Fuck, I don't know what Waterloo is. But I need a job. Okay, fine. I'll sign up for that. Went for the interview. They showed me this brick. It was like, I think they called it the bullfrog.
Right.
It was about this thick, kind of latch it to your belt, and this was in '97. And I said, fuck, I'm screwed. Like, this is never going to work. I need a job. Fuck. So I said yes. So I went to RIM. I got there in May of '98. They hadn't launched BlackBerry yet, and I finally saw what they were working on. I was like, "Oh my god, this is actually incredible." They couldn't tell me because for confidentiality reasons. But when I saw the first device, which is a Leapfrog, which they launched as a BlackBerry, literally 3 months later, it was pretty amazing.
Right.
So I got to see that journey of RIM, of Mike and Jim, and the community,
right,
over a span of about a decade. I left in 2007.
Right.
But I saw that growth over the decade, and that's kind of when I got my first spark.
Right. Okay.
So this was, what got me was seeing how, Mike and Jim, they took this idea, they took it global, it changed lives. Right. But in Waterloo specifically, people were getting rich. People were getting rich off of RIM. They were buying houses. They were sending kids to school. Companies were getting formed around RIM. To service your employees. This whole ecosystem is really fascinating that these two guys could create this massive ecosystem of people that were themselves getting wealthy and doing things they wanted to do. And so
continue to do with the physics center in Waterloo.
Correct. The physics center, the amount, Mike has given like 200 million plus, Jim has given hundreds of millions, and now he's doing all kinds of other things. So I was like, wow, this is really amazing that two people can do this. And that's when solving a problem the world cares about. And that was my first spark.
Right.
In 2007, I decided, so I was in engineering for a bit. I did a lot of the wireless hardware design. I decided to switch to IP. I started doing IP work. I did a little bit of IP infringement. I was on the NTP case,
right.
A few other cases.
Right.
So I got to see how sort of global IP works.
Right.
Global IP litigation.
And how does it work?
It's nasty.
Yeah.
So it's really nasty. So the thing that we realized at RIM, both with the carriers, with the standards bodies, with the Nokias and the Motorola's, that it's a really nasty world out there.
Yeah.
Right? Canada's a relatively nice ecosystem. Once you leave Canada, it's pretty ugly.
Yeah. So, okay, so we'll come back to that. We'll get to questions, by the way. Who's got a question? You guys better have your question. I actually personally approached 3 people, so I'm going to get you if you don't have your questions ready. But one of the things that I picked up on was you talked about the global nature
right.
of the problem
right.
that RIM was addressing and that kind of vision to it. So maybe you can kind of contrast the local problem solver versus somebody who is really addressing a global problem.
Right.
And those, from the standpoint of like providing some guidance to startups today about what they should be going after.
Right. So my inspiration was at RIM because you saw that it was possible to have a global impact from Canada.
Right.
Coming in '99, I didn't know any better because in '99, all the dot-coms were going on. So I just assumed you start a company and it becomes a multi-billion-dollar company and everything happens. And then we started a few other companies and they didn't go so well. And I realized it was not that easy. But I think over the years, what I've seen is, I think we're living in a very unique time. We have this, some people call this the digital substrate that
mm-hmm.
connects billions of people around the world, right? So you have an ability to connect with a billion people or billions of people around the world and solve their wants, needs, problems, whatever you want to call it, in a unique way. RIM had to ship physical hardware. We don't need to do that anymore. We have the internet, we have mobile, we have internet, and billions more people are coming on any point in time. So I think we're at this unique point in time where we can do that at very low cost. You can capture someone in Australia as easily as you can do someone in Hamilton, right? And the other thing I also realized, so after RIM, we started Rypple, then we sold Rypple. And what I realized at Rypple was just really how hard it is to start a startup, or to do a startup. There was, maybe several months ago, there was a series of all these blog posts that came out about depression issues and suicidal issues. I went through that. I experienced that. There were many times in the 4 or 5 years that we were there that I was incredibly depressed. I'm a very happy person. I'm an optimistic person. The cloud is always silver for me. But those 4 years were very dark years for me.
Yeah.
And so coming out of that, I was like, it's really, really hard to do a company. So why not tackle the biggest problem you can tackle? No, not the biggest problem, but why not tackle something that impacts millions or billions of people? Because we have this new layer that allows you to connect to those people.
That's right.
So that's going to inform my view these days. When I think about what opportunities I look at when we invest, and when I think about if I was to leave today and go start something, what would I look for? I look for things where I can have impact on millions or billions of people.
Right.
Because today we have that opportunity. And you know what? It's hard anyway, so might as well try to tackle the billion people.
Okay, so if you haven't been here before, I try to, as much as possible, have a 3-way dialogue. So I'm not doing any of the talking. Go
What
ahead.
went wrong at RIM and when?
Yeah.
Sorry?
What went wrong at RIM and when?
It's a great question. So have any of you guys read the Steven Sinofsky blog post on LinkedIn recently? Any of Steven Sinofsky, the ex-Microsoft guy, he had a blog post on LinkedIn. Anyone read it?
Wow, a few months ago.
It was a few weeks ago. So I would read that blog post. It's a phenomenal blog post. But I think so. What went wrong? I think what went wrong. It was a classical case of innovator's dilemma, right? In '98, the problem that Mike and Jim solved was there was low bandwidth, You wanted power consumption was an issue. Mobile processing was very, very low, and they designed a system that gave you kind of like this half-ass desktop experience on a mobile device, right? So everything around the business was optimized around conserving battery life, conserving bandwidth, and what's the third one? Oh, that was those two things. And carriers loved it. The carriers loved it because there was no bandwidth issues.
Size was probably still an issue.
Size was an issue. And you didn't have much processing power anyway, so you had to be very, really shrink what you could do on the device because you didn't have much processing power. 2007, all that changed, right? An iPhone comes out, they don't care about bandwidth, they don't care about processing power, they don't care about battery life, and they built a completely different experience. And so what made RIM successful was the thing that destroyed it, because they still held on to that view that this is what was important, and what we had to put out were products that catered to these three criteria. And guess what? Our biggest customers are still saying this is what's important. I don't get what Apple is doing. I would never put it on my network. I would never bring it to my company because there's no security there. RIM, I want you to do this. And so RIM continued on that path. And if you actually look at the stock price, so 2007 iPhone comes out.
Still got a lot of that stock?
No. So the stock price continues to rise for a few more years. The revenue continues to rise until 2011 before it turns upside down. So Steven Sinofsky did an amazing piece about what went wrong at RIM, and he talked about those changing assumptions, but also how you're in this environment where your best customers are saying, I still want this product. I don't get Apple. I don't get iPhone. I would never bring it into my IT ecosystem.
Yeah. It's hard to break out.
Right, and you're making a ton of revenue.
Yeah.
And if you were to, Jim and a bunch of his people had this new idea that they'd become a software company. What you needed to do was you would need to cannibalize all your revenue, your hardware revenue.
Right.
RIM never had that culture. So I'm making 70% margin. 70% of my revenue is coming from hardware. So now there's a bunch of guys in there that were saying, forget all of that. Let's go to software. We're going to lose all this 70% margin, but we're going to take this 30% revenue and go from there. It's hard to make that decision.
Yeah.
So, but read that blog post. It's really, really well written.
Right?
I was just wondering when and why you decided to go to law school.
Oh, great question. So 2007. So I did engineering and then I switched to IP out of interest. What I'd seen the work that I was doing, which is analog RF design, was going on to chips, and it was all being sent to Japan and China. And I was like, I could either do a master's and then move to Japan, or I could do something else. So I decided to do something else. I went to IP. I went to IP because I just found it really fascinating. It was really interesting. I went to law school because I thought it was interesting. The other reason I went to law school was because I actually was, at the time, petrified by the law. And I knew I wanted to start a business at one point in time. And I realized it's impossible to escape the legal framework. It's impossible to escape investment bankers and finance people as an engineer. So I felt like I needed to learn the language of law. I needed to learn the language of business. So 2007, I went back to school and did a law and M.B.A. And it's in the second year, that's when we started Rypple.
How many people on the founding team at Rypple?
The three of us. Yeah.
And who came to who? Did you guys know each other beforehand? Or?
No. So Dan DeBow, David Stein, they had just sold WorkBrain, which is they were founders of. They had sold it. They'd gone golfing and traveling around the world. They decided it was really boring, and they wanted to start a company. And they needed a grunt to do some work for them. And Dan is an alumni of the program I was in. He came back, he did a talk. I was really inspired by what he said, and we met up for lunch. And he said, look, we're trying to start a new company. We're looking for ideas. We need some help. I was like, yeah, I'll jump on it. And I started helping them. And then he's like, well, we have no funding. I'm like, I don't care. We're not going to pay you. I don't care. You guys sound like fun guys to work with. So I hung out with them, and we started a company, and then I stayed still.
Nice. That's a great story. So that was at U of T in the law program there? Okay. And so maybe take us a little bit through sort of what were the kind of key moments where, Rypple, you knew, oh yeah, this is actually going to be something. I suppose that Dan had been through it a little bit, although not probably to the extent that Rypple took off. So maybe a few of the key points. And so when did you get to 10 employees, kind of thing?
Right.
Right.
So I think we were lucky in that we could raise a very large seed round very fast because the investors that had backed WorkBrain and made money on WorkBrain, they funded Rypple. So
Right.
we raised a very large seed round. I think it was 5 million or 7 million.
That was Canadian?
Canadian, yeah.
That was your seed round.
That's our seed round.
How much
Yeah.
was that? Sorry.
5 to 7
Sorry,
million.
5 to
Yeah.
7 million.
How many times has that
5
happened
million.
ever?
It happens occasionally.
As a seed round?
Fair point, fair point. It doesn't happen very often. No.
Yeah.
For how much of the business?
Well, that's probably
It's
confidential.
not official, not a lot.
Who were the investors? Is that?
It was a company it's a firm fund that doesn't exist anymore. Edgestone was half, and angel investors were the other half. So Peter Thiel was an investor,
Right.
Roger Martin was an investor, and a bunch of other people that we thought were strategic were investors.
Right. And actually, Dan has the connection with Peter. Is that
Correct.
Yeah.
So when Dan went back, Dan studied at Stanford, and so Peter Thiel was professor, and so Peter Thiel came.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Does
So-
everybody know who Peter is?
No.
Yeah? No? Why don't you talk about him for just a
So
second?
Peter Thiel currently...
He's probably been instrumental in this whole story a little bit, but maybe
Rypple?
not.
No.
Yeah. No? Not really? Oh, okay. Okay.
So
don't-
Peter
Forget
Thiel...
about it.
Peter Thiel. So Peter Thiel is the guy that currently is giving people $100,000 to not go to university. So he's paying young kids $100,000 to not go to
Yeah,
university. He's a
right.
libertarian,
Yeah.
a really great guy, really
Yeah.
smart guy.
Okay.
His claim to fame was currently is actually Facebook. So he was one of the earliest investors in Facebook.
Yeah.
I think he was one of the first investors in Facebook. So he's made I don't know, over $1 billion.
So who then out of the angel and investor group do you think was most consequential?
I think we leaned on all our advisors for different things throughout the years. And Roger Martin was there. He joined our board later. He was an advisor for a long time. He always had this line of your strategies what not to do. And so one of the challenges we ran into when you have $5 million is when you have a tough decision to make, you don't make the decision. You say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And what ends up happening is you spread your resources and you don't do what you're supposed to do. So Roger Martin was helpful in that regard, cutting a lot of those things down. But I think I would say a lot of the Ripple success was Dan and David. It was sort of their hustle that got us where we got to. And it wasn't until we closed the sale that it felt real. It didn't feel real until we closed it.
Okay, go ahead.
So you joined Rypple while you were in JD M.B.A.
Correct.
Were you ever full time at Rypple or?
Yeah. So we when I joined them, they were looking at a bunch of different ideas, and then a few months later, we came up with the idea of Rypple, and we started that. So for the first 2.5 years, I was doing school and I was doing Rypple, and then I graduated in 2010, and it's full time through at that
So
point.
a lot of Adderall or?
I did not sleep a lot, but I had a kid too, so that made it very easy to not sleep.
Wait a minute. So you. Whoa. So you were in school, in law school,
JD MBA, doing law and MBA.
right? And, so a double major in law and an MBA. You were working on a startup, and you had a kid at the same time.
Correct. I don't recommend.
And you have hair.
I don't recommend that to anybody.
No kidding. And happily married and everything.
She's still with me today.
Wow, that's.
You didn't say happy.
I want to have a
Happily-
grind.
no, happily
I want to have a grind where we just have like founders' wives.
No, the key to this is a week after we got married, I started school, so she's never known anything else.
Ah, right. That's impressive. Wow, that is very impressive. So again, you 10 employees,
Yes.
or what sort of made you ring the bell as a team? In terms of milestones. I mean, we've seen the social network where they were counting users, and of course Daniel had his phone set up so that every time somebody joined But, so what were kind of those key memorable moments was it user growth or was it engagement? And maybe a little bit about, Anish was here last month from Google Ventures, and he talked a little bit about making sure that you're measuring engagement per capita versus just user growth.
So key moments for us. I mean, closing the round was obviously an important moment because then we became a real startup with real obligations to investors and angels. Hiring our first employee was pretty amazing experience.
Who was that?
Tiho Bajik. He's now CTO at a company in San Fran called Nitro.
Okay.
Which is an Australian company that moved to San Francisco.
Okay.
Now
And was he the CTO through it all, or?
No, he was effectively our CTO. Yeah.
Right.
Kind of like a chief engineer.
Okay.
So he was there. So that was a critical moment. The Economist wrote an article about us about 6 months after we launched. That was really cool because I'm a huge fan of The Economist. So I was like, oh my God, we're in The Economist. This is so cool.
How did that come about? Did you go after that? Or
it was a quiet news day. They needed something to write about. Honestly, like they reached out to us and they're like, oh, I need a story. And you guys have a really cool story. So they wrote about it. It's a huge spike in press, traffic, signups.
That's Roger Martin, man, all over.
Okay, it's just.
No, they like the story. So they like the story.
How did they
How did they
find
find?
out? Yeah.
It's a good question. I actually don't know.
So Roger Martin had nothing to do with the Economist story?
No, we didn't. We actually didn't. So we use a lot of our advisors for advice.
Yeah.
We didn't use them too much for PR or other stuff.
Okay.
But I don't remember how they found us. But a lot of it was people love the story.
What's your startup?
Mine?
Yeah.
A social search engine. It's called Topic Curious, and it's going to help tame the noise of social media and help users find content based on what they're interested in rather than following people. So my question, if I could, is if you have a free app or if you're doing the freemium thing, which for better or worse, I suppose, what kind of traction should you look for in order to decide that this is something that's going to take off, something that you should continue to pursue, maybe as a percentage of signups?
Right.
What traction? What's the threshold for
The conversion rate.
continuing?
Right.
Or another way to put that question is, when somebody walks into your office, what makes you go, oh, we got to get in on this?
I'm going to give you the legal answer. It depends. It really depends. So I think I've seen a whole range of different conversion rates. You look at a company like Facebook, right? Like they actually have incredibly tiny conversion rates when it comes to the ads, but 1 billion people use it, so it doesn't matter, right? Dropbox, same thing. They have very low conversion rates, about 2%. But again, the market is so massive that 2% is okay. So I think it depends on, in your case, social search, something that everybody could use. So I don't think you necessarily need a high conversion rate. But I think what I look at when I look at those kinds of startups, I look for engagement. Like any freemium model, is there a group of engaged users? And when you hit scale and you get all the free users that you think you're going to get, and that small percentage convert, is that a meaningful number? So I kind of like work it backwards.
So it's not just about the percentage; it's also has to do with the size of the market.
Exactly. Like Andrew Chen, many years ago, wrote a post about Facebook, and how he made a really bad decision about Facebook in the early days because he saw the 0.5% conversion rate for Facebook ads and thought that Facebook would never become a big business. What he failed to understand was that Facebook's market was like billions of people. So 0.5% of billions of people doesn't matter. It's pretty big. So that's what I look at.
You mentioned a couple of startups that weren't so successful. Were you involved in something besides Rypple that
So
should
Rypple,
also be in your bio?
So Rypple, I mean, like Rypple was it took 4 years to get to where we got to, and there were many
False
points
starts.
where we were like, "This is it, we're done."
Right.
Like we raised a Series A, which we almost lost the night before we were supposed to close it. We were raising a Series B that we almost lost. We almost lost the acquisition. So there were all these many points in those 4 years
Right.
where things almost all fell apart. People leaving, customers leaving, that kind of stuff. So most of my experience is from Rypple,
Yeah.
and just how hard that was.
So, did you work mostly in handling the legal aspects of
No.
You work mostly as the engineer?
No, so my job at Rypple was the operations guy.
Right,
So Dan was really the product and marketing guy.
right,
David took care of all our sales.
Right.
We had a strong engineering team, and I was the guy that kind of kept it all
right.
going.
So tell us about then maybe, you know, what were the things that were structured right about Rypple from the earliest days that made it work well through a Series A and then through an exit? Like, are there any kinds of insights that you want to share with a founder in terms of locking up IP or, you know, what they should be conscious of? You know, maybe something came up during the Salesforce deal that you mentioned it almost fell through, or whatever, you know, or even through the Series A. What were the kinds of things that?
Sure. You know, I think the thing that for me was the most important throughout those 4 years was sort of the vision that we had when we set up the Global company. You know, like I said, there was a lot of those really difficult moments where you get all kinds of crazy thoughts, and it's the vision that kind of keeps you going through those periods where it's like, you know, it's worth doing all this because we're going to accomplish this. And for us, it really was, you know, we really believe that if people got enough feedback, they would do better work and they'd feel better and they'd
Right.
be happier. So that was, for me, a really strong driving vision, which kind of carried us through the whole time. And that was how we recruit employees. That's why the media glommed onto our story. That's why some of our early customers joined us, because it wasn't so much that the product was great, it actually sucked. It was that they believed in the vision. They believed that we were going to try to get to that point. We hadn't gotten there, but they were willing to go along the journey. That's why Facebook joined us. That's why Mozilla joined us in the early days, because they believed in that vision. And that was a really important part of keeping the whole team together during those hard times. Because a lot of those guys could have left at any point.
Right. So you're sitting here telling me as a venture capitalist that it's the idea.
It's the vision, yeah.
Yeah, that's impressive. That's
It's
a
a story,
departure
right?
from script, right? It's a team, right? It's always the team that we hear about the most.
Yes.
Typically
But how do you keep the
from
team
venture.
together?
Exactly, I think that's a good point. And
Like,
I-
if you look at some
know,
of the stats, something like 70 or 80% of startups fail because of founder issues,
Right.
or team issues.
Right.
And so how do you keep the team together? For us, we had a lot of problems. We did
Right.
a lot of things really badly. It was the vision and what people thought they were accomplishing that
Right.
kept the team together. So that was a critical part of it.
Right. Go ahead.
So if you say the product sucks, and could you just say, like, if you were meeting an investor, like, what would you say then about the vision? You said the vision several times, but what would you say? And to wait all
Can
this-
I interject for just a second? Like, the product, I mean, I was using it, I was teaching a course at the time, and so I was using it for feedback. I don't think it ever sucked, but it was simple.
Right.
But anyhow, go ahead.
It was intentionally simple. I guess when I say it sucks, what I mean is that, you know, when you talk about the metrics you look at, right? Like we were very obsessed with engagement. Because we had a thesis that the new, you know, our old enterprise software, the WorkBrain that they built, the thesis was you get this company to sign a multi-million-dollar license, you lock them in for 3 years, and you don't care how many people use it. They're locked in, they're paying you money, you go. So the thesis when we started our company was, in the new world of enterprise, we believe that you had to provide IT or whoever's paying the bills, evidence of engagement of people on the product, right? So engagement, we always found there was a group of people that were highly, highly engaged, and most people weren't, right? Kind of like the 1% of achievers really cared, most people didn't care. Another thesis we had was we didn't need to have enterprise salespeople who were really expensive, like $250,000 to $500,000, because we could leverage consumer tactics to virally spread the software. And that was something we got really good, but we never had it great. And I don't think any enterprise software company has actually solved that problem. There's a new generation today trying to do it in mobile, but that's what I mean. So, great.
Somebody had a question here? Go ahead.
Yeah, how much of your decision to invest your time
for free with the founding team is based on their previous success. Do you think that that's a worthwhile way to go, and what kind of would that do for you?
I think in retrospect, I think that was one of the smartest decisions I made. Like I said, I don't see myself as an entrepreneur. I don't have this burning need to go and start company after company after company. I think Jeff Hawkins actually compares it to serial killers. Like, why would you want to do that? He sees it as a tool to solve problems, right? So sometimes entrepreneurship is the right way to go, sometimes not. So I've always had a mindset, like, I don't care about starting a company. A big part of, I wanted to one day, but a big part of it is they had just sold the company, and I thought, I can learn from them over the next few years. And what better way to learn from two guys who had actually done it before? And the other thing we did too is so they had the track record, which meant the door was open. The other thing that Dan and David did very smartly was they involved their VCs in the process of brainstorming for the ideas. So we would, and they would give them, the VCs gave them the time because they had made money for them. So they gave Dan and David the time, and we would go through all these ideas with them. And there was a lot of ideas they didn't really care much about it. And then this idea they really, really got excited about.
Right.
And then people were getting excited about the ideas. Potential customers were getting excited about the ideas. We're like, wait, there's something here. We know that the problem exists, the pain exists, and people care about it. That was the easy part. But the solution part was what took 4 years.
Right.
I would argue we're still trying to figure it out.
Go ahead, Russell.
So if it was so successful, what almost killed the first round?
The first round?
Yeah, you told that you were close.
So we were about to close the Series A, and one of the investors discovered that we didn't have founder vesting. So all of a sudden, the night before it was supposed to close, he's like, look, there's no founder vesting. I insist that you have founder vesting. And I called up Dan and David, and he's like, no, we're not going to do this. And I'm like, are they going to walk away? I'm like, sure, let them walk away. We can't do this. Like, this is against our beliefs.
Right. So how many people know what founder vesting is? You want to explain that a little bit? I mean, that's a critical point, right?
Sure.
It's a huge point in terms of structuring your deal.
Right. So founder vesting is much like options. When you grant somebody options, they vest over 4 years. Founder vesting or reverse vesting is the opposite. So you as a founder, you get your 50% of shares. If you have two co-founders, 50% each. And they reverse vest over 4 years. So the restrictions on sale of those shares will keep coming off over 4 years. It's a relatively it's not uncommon. It's relatively common. I think for us it was, well, they brought it up at the last minute. What? We're not going to do this. Right,
so you own your company, except for you have to earn back the ownership of your company.
It's important
after you bring in a professional investor, right?
It's actually a good idea when you have big co-founding teams.
Right.
I've been so my
Right.
the second startup I joined. It was
Right.
my startup. I joined them. Had about 5 or 6 co-founders.
Right.
Right, and some of them left.
Right.
So in those situations,
It's really
reverse
key.
is important.
Absolutely,
We have lots
yeah.
of co-founders.
And so what percentage of Canadian deals do you think have founder vesting as a requirement of a venture deal versus something that happens in the Valley? Any insight into that?
It seems to be relatively the norm in the Valley. I haven't seen it in Canada.
Right.
We don't see it in our deals, and we don't ask for it in our deals.
Right. Okay. Hey.
But I've seen a few deals that are led by non-Canadians that have insisted on instilling founder vesting.
Right. Interesting. So we talked about vision, and then in the exchange that we had leading up to this, there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I think are along the same vein. This idea of self-coaching, as a way for founders to kind of get through the hard days, and also the role of narrative, both in this story of your personal journey, but also in terms of how that helps hold the company together.
Right. So the coaching was actually in a different context.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you want me to explain the context for that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sure. So there's a lot of hand wringing in Canada about can we build big companies, right? For a decade, people keep saying no, Canadians can't build big technology companies. We can't build multi-billion-dollar companies. And I think that narrative has kind of gotten out of hand, and I think we should forget about it. We should move on. So the what I have seen is, 2006, 2007, it was very true. It was very hard to find a growing, vibrant technology company in Canada, right? A lot of them died out in 2000, and it took a while for them to die out. And there was nothing in 2008, but a lot has changed today. And there's a ton of companies that I think are well on their way to hitting multi-billion-dollar status and multi-billion-dollar status in Canada. So
You want to name any? Besides Hootsuite?
yeah, so I mean, I think Hootsuite. We're betting on Hootsuite. We're betting on Desire to Learn. I think Shopify is another company that I think looks like it's heading that direction. And I see lots more that I think are heading in that direction. So they're a long way off. They're heading in that direction.
Right.
So I think the times have changed. So I think there's this hand wringing about can we build great technology companies in here, right? And there's a lot of people saying that no, we can't do it. We don't have the talent. Blah blah blah. Whatever. We can't build this. You can only do it in the valley. So I don't believe that's true. What I believe is we actually have a pretty decent government who has pretty good policies around innovation, commercialization. There's a lot of support from the government for exporting through EDC, right? A lot of grants, a lot of support through EDC. We have incredibly great universities and smart people. So much so that a lot of these people get hired by Google and Microsoft, and they go down the valley. So I keep asking myself, like, why don't we have these companies here? Or rather, what would it take to create those successful companies here? And it's an important question for us because we are looking for those companies. We invest in those companies. We want to grow those companies. So it's important for us to those pieces are there.
Right.
So one of my thoughts is the thing that we can do in Canada is we do not have an ecosystem here of experience, right? You go to the Valley, they've gone to 3 decades of multiple generations of people going through multiple technology cycles. So they've seen these problems before, and they've solved them 100 times. So you want to hire a VP of marketing for a SaaS company, you have 30 great people to choose from because there's been so many companies that they've worked at.
Right.
We don't have that here, but I don't think it's the end of the world. So my thinking around that was, what we need to figure out here is how do you learn fast?
Right.
How do you learn quickly?
Right.
And so I look at our portfolio companies, I look at other companies in Canada, and what are they doing? So some of the things they do, there's a lot of companies have a footprint in San Fran. We did as well.
Yeah.
So Rypple had a footprint in San Fran. Certain critical talent we couldn't hire here, we would hire in our San Fran office, and we would work with them. I know a lot of founders who spend a quarter or half their time in the Valley. Going down there, get immersed, get the ideas, and come back here to work on it. Because here, the beauty of Canada is that you don't have that massive churn of employees like you have in Silicon Valley. And you can find people here and you can keep them for years. Whereas there, 6 months, 1 year, they're gone, right? So we have the benefit. But so they travel back and forth. Another thing I see very often is I'm seeing a number of companies now hiring coaches for their people. So a number of companies, including Win Mobile, they hire agile coaches, they hire Scrum coaches, they hire leadership coaches to train their people faster, so they learn faster. Right?
That's great. So that's kind of at the post Series A level that they're doing that.
Well, the traveling starts even before Series A.
Right. Yeah.
The coaching
Right.
starts. Yeah.
Okay.
And the coaching for the CEOs, I think it's very important to have a coach if you're a founder CEO,
right?
If you can, or find somebody outside the company,
right?
Because within the company, you got to remember you're the CEO. Everyone is looking to you for the cues, right? If you are having a tough day, if you're wearing emotions on the shoulder, and you have no one else to talk to, and you start talking to your people, well, they're dissecting that left, right, and center. And I was in this position where, as the one of the co-founders, but also the chief operations guy, I was very close to Dan and David. So I knew what Dan and David did. I knew how they thought. I knew what they intended. But I was also very close to the employees, and I kind of knew what they were upset about and what they were annoyed about, and how they interpreted the CEO's actions. And I got to tell you, it was very harsh to me. So I think that's why I think when I joined Wrapp, I got a coach. At OMERS, I have a coach, and I encourage a lot of CEOs to have coaches, even though it costs money. Because you have that person who's not part of your organization that you can talk to, you can bounce ideas off of, and you can discuss these difficult problems without having to kind of show that to your employees.
Okay, so this is a call. We've got we're almost 5 to 8 here. So if you came here with a burning question, make sure that you get your hand up and get your question asked. Go ahead.
Hi, George. I have a question to follow up on your thing about coaches. I've had coaches before, professional coaches as well. As a founder, would you recommend a certain kind of coach? In the sense, would be someone who's, say, someone who's an ex-founder or ex-entrepreneur themselves. What do you recommend?
Okay, so so I'm a bit of a hippie. I would say for the CEO, I think a life coach. To be honest, I know it sounds really hokey. Maybe it's because I was in San Francisco for a while. But I think a life coach, right? I have a wife, I have a kid, and I think with a life coach who has experience with business, you kind of learn how to tackle what you need to tackle in your personal life, so that you can be there for work, right? So I like having a life coach. I'm lucky in that I found actually a coach who's a really solid business coach, CEO coach. He was someone recommended to us by Greylock, and but he's also actually had a startup. So he's been through that, and he coached a lot of startup CEOs.
Where's he based?
San Fran. So we just Skype.
Yeah. Okay.
Skype phone calls. That kind of stuff.
Interesting. Go ahead.
Do you think we have sufficient venture capital funding and risk tolerance in Canada for the tech space? Like, it's obviously been there for other sectors, you know, mining, oil and gas in Calgary. Do you think that exists in Toronto, Canada, and maybe that's why San Fran and New York and other hotbeds draw because they have that access to capital?
No, I don't think so. So I think yes, there's a problem with VC. There's not a lot of capital in Canada. There's only like 10 active funds today, and a lot of them have much capital left. But I don't think that's a problem. But I actually think like, when we raised capital, our first raise was from a Canadian company. But when we went for our actual Series A, we spoke to I think 50 or 60 VCs. Most were in the U.S. And our second investor was a U.S. investor.
How big was the Series A? Sorry.
7 million.
Oh, 7 million. Okay, so it was 5 and then 7? Okay.
Yeah, so I think ideally yes, it's more capital. Ideally yes, in Canada they're more risk tolerant, if you will. But actually, a lot of the American funds come here constantly. We compete a lot with the American funds for deals, and so they come here. So I mean, capital is borderless. We're also starting to see European and Asian funds look here in Canada.
So yeah, you also mentioned the culture, like one of the, in our email exchange as well, is the risk culture, and he touched on the mining industry. So maybe that's your opening.
Oh wow, that's a good one. Actually, so risk tolerance, I think this is part of the narrative I'm talking about. So I think we've kind of convinced ourselves that Canadian VCs aren't risk tolerant, that Canadian entrepreneurs aren't risk tolerant, that we as a society aren't risk tolerant. And it's something that I'd like to urge you to think about an alternative perspective. And I think when you think about it, if you look at Canada, right? Canada is a frontier nation, if you think about it. Most of it is uninhabited, and yet a lot of people live in those places. You look at our mining industry; it is actually world class. You know, my brother, my best friend, they work for this multi-billion-dollar mining consulting company that works on all the biggest projects throughout the world. People come here for that expertise, right? So I don't think there's anything in our culture as Canadians that makes us risk tolerant, but I think we have somehow talked ourselves in the tech world into thinking of ourselves as being risk tolerant, risk averse. I remember when I came back here, I was in the Valley for about 7 months, and I was in New York before that. When I came back here, I remember talking to this really, really smart, really well-established VC here, and we were talking about what kind of companies should I be looking at, what kind of companies should I be investing in, and he goes, Canadians don't know how to build platform companies. And I was like, what? What is so unique about a platform company that Canadians can't build it? And so I keep hearing these things that we can't do this, we can't do that, and I find it hard to believe when you look at other industries like finance, you look at mining, you look at TIF, right? You look at all these things where we are world class. I also discovered recently that our pension system, CPPIB, OMERS, and teachers.
There's a Center for Pension Fund Management here in Toronto. Yeah.
Right. So we are considered world class when it comes to how we build our pension systems and how we manage our pension funds. To the point where I was once down in the U.S. And I met one of the pension managers for one of the states, and he asked me where I'm from. I was like, "Oh, I'm from OMERS." And he was like, "Oh my God, you're from OMERS? That's amazing. Can you find us some time to meet your CEO because we want to learn what you do?" I'm like, "What? We're just like a little Canadian pension fund." So I think when I look outside our little tech world, there's a lot of examples in Canada where Canadians have taken tons of risks and they've built great global success stories. But we just kind of told ourselves the story that we don't do it.
Go ahead.
Outside your teammates and your coach, did you have any other support group?
Oh yeah,
Help you through the
lots of support.
depression and all
Your
My
wife.
My wife's a big one. Well, I stopped doing that because then she started getting stressed out when I started talking to her. Other founders.
That's a good founder.
Other founders.
insight.
There was very many years, like when we started Rypple, there was a group that had started this founders lunch, where it was just founders getting together, no investors, no professionals, just founders to have their group therapy sessions. That was very helpful.
How open were you guys? Like, how open was the founders? Were you guys secretive or just open it up?
It was pretty open. There's YPO as well.
Right.
I think that's for more mature companies.
Right.
But yeah, no, other founders were not as strong.
Okay, one or two more questions. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, you said you went through 4 years of kind of bad times. What got you through those 4 years? Like the vision of where the company was going to go, or was there something else?
No, it was not all bad. It was a big roller coaster. Lots of ups, lots of downs. Right? The highs were really high, and the lows are really low. You all have it in the span of a day. I think what kept us going was we had a great team. We enjoyed spending time together. We enjoyed being together as a team. And we all, when we recruited on the vision. Right? We paid people very poorly. We gave them lots of options. And that was deliberately designed to separate other people that were only doing it for the money. And so people that joined us generally in the early days were in there because they believed in solving that problem as well. They liked the team they were with. And that's why I think the vision was so important, because that's how we filter our hiring. And that's kind of what got me through a lot of the difficult days.
My question is if you believe in cycles. So right now everyone talks about the energy cycle being at the bottom. Potentially maybe next cycle is at a peak up. So if you can comment on any of the global trends that you may experience in your fund, and if you have any strategy how to take advantage of these cycles.
Are we in a bubble?
It feels like one.
Feels like one.
It feels. I think it's more. You see it more intensely in the valley.
Right.
The level of competition for deals, for people, for residential
Right.
real estate, it's crazy.
Right.
So if you're in the valley right now, a lot of people are asking the question a lot because it feels very. To them, they say it feels a lot like it's 1999.
Right.
I haven't seen.
But then if you go.
I haven't seen the overflow into Canada
Right.
yet.
Yeah.
And you look at all the IPOs that have happened over the last year. A lot of them have done quite well. I think a Twitter IPO will be very interesting to see how it plays out. But I think we're in bubbly times for sure. The valuations that people come to us expecting is quite high.
Right.
And given the competition for a lot of these deals, you kind of have to pay.
Right. Right.
So we're definitely not a low.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Sorry, Vic. Yeah, go ahead.
So as a VC now, what really makes you excited about a startup comes to you? Can you make an example of, you mentioned a vision, can you more tangibly say, this is, like, I think this makes me really excited with?
And also, expand on that a little bit in terms of sort of what are you seeing? So deal flow, what is it? What are kind of some themes that are resonating?
I'm actually really bullish on Canada right now. I know what it was like in 2007. What we see right now is that a lot of Canadian guys have a lot more swagger. I think they're thinking bigger. They're demanding more, which is good. I think. What gets me excited? I think I talked about it a bit earlier. So I think we're in the unique point in time where we can touch a lot of people. So what gets me excited is deals where I see that the potential addressable audience is very large. And one of the last deals we did was a company. There's a couple of deals we've done recently. One is a company called Interaction. They make a brain sensing headset. If we have timed the market right, and I don't know, time will tell. Anyone in the world could use that, and that's a big group of people that could use it, right? Because it could help anybody with their brain health. And if you work in the knowledge industry, it's a pretty important problem to solve. Another company we invested in was a company called Ranovis, which is tackling sort of the data pipe problem. So, with all the big data, with all these billions of people online, you have these massive data centers that are going to start getting blocked up because they don't have fast enough connections, and they're solving that problem, and that problem affects a lot of people. But more interestingly, in that deal, that was a lot of old Nortel research that now, many years later, is coming to benefit these customers and these group of people. And that's exciting. So what gets me excited is things that I think can impact a lot of people. There's also these. There's also these technology trends that are happening today that we follow very closely, and anything that's kind of leveraging one of these tech trends gets us very excited. So those are the ones that we think we watch very closely. Are you look at 3D printing, right? 3D printing is one of these technologies that's now leveraging Moore's law, so it is increasing exponentially, and it's actually, some people think of it as kind of gimmicky, but if you actually look at what's being 3D printed today, it's actually pretty phenomenal. So 3D printing is one. You look at AI and machine learning, sort of the narrow AI, not the general AI, but the narrow AI. Again, that's another thing that's riding Moore's law, and you're seeing exponentially improving AI. Now, we use it today already, machine learning, right? Like Pandora, you use it. That's all narrow AI.
Is SaaS still hot or not?
Enterprise SaaS is still hot. It's one of the areas we look at. What else we look at?
Variable computing.
Variable computing?
Variable.
Wearable. Yeah. No, we look at wearable. Yeah, we're pretty excited about wearable.
Victor.
Yeah. When you mention the team, how do you choose the team member in your group?
At Rypple.
Yeah. And what kind of a person you want to be?
Is this while you're still getting people to work for free, or after? It's an important question.
I think there's lots written about it online. I think for me personally, when I look at people, one of the things that I learned from Dan was when you're trying to fill a need, you look for the best person anywhere in the world that you can find. Dan wasn't shy about hiring people from San Fran, or paying them American salaries to either entice them to work for us or come to Canada. Ryan Holmes at Hootsuite does the same thing, right? So you look for the best people in the world for that thing if you can find them and afford them, and you look for team fit. And you look for some of the. And I'm very big on people that buy into the problem you're solving. So I would actually take someone who is slightly less skilled, but who really passionately believes in the problem, than the best person who is kind of like, yeah, whatever, about the problem set. At least in the early stages. I think later on, different story, but in the early stages, I think that's what I trade off.
So we're now at 10 after. There's two things that I'd like you to get to touch on before we wrap this up. So sorry if there's one or two more questions. But so AngelList, we talked about it last month a little bit. I think the impact of what's going on with AngelList and syndicates hasn't really been fully realized. So what's your take on AngelList and the emergence of syndicates and how that's going to change the Canadian investments?
I love it.
Right.
I'm a huge fan of AngelList. Now I've been a VC for 7 months and I've been an entrepreneur for more. So I think anything that helps entrepreneurs is good.
Right.
I think AngelList is incredibly powerful. Actually, it's win-win. In my view, it's a win-win for VCs as well as entrepreneurs, because it's a way for entrepreneurs that don't want to take venture capital to finance their businesses, and it's also a way for entrepreneurs that want more time to prove out the business before they take venture capital. So it's great for that.
Right.
It's great for VCs because you can monitor companies, you can watch them as they grow, and think about who you're interested in.
Right.
A friend of mine in the Canadian VC scene, he actually uses AngelList or used to use AngelList to understand the new business models that were coming out.
Right.
So this is back to the fast learning, right? Like
Yeah.
so as Canadian VC, you actually don't see as many deals as my friends in the US see.
Right.
So how do I learn about what the new business models are and what the new entrepreneurs are doing and what are they experimenting with?
Right.
AngelList is actually wonderful for that.
Yeah.
Because I can learn that through AngelList. I can meet
Right.
with those entrepreneurs.
And do you think that the industry is responding to AngelList in Canada? Like, or things like it?
I don't think I haven't seen anyone opposed to it.
Right.
Fully prepared.
Sorry?
Fully prepared.
Yeah?
Yeah,
They raised an
yeah.
AngelList, yeah.
So, what was the first one? So it's a great company. It's actually very good
Yeah.
e-marketing, e-commerce solution.
Yeah.
Very innovative.
Yeah. And then the last thing I wanted to get you to talk about, I saw your slideshow about gamification a little bit, and perhaps it's a bit of a technical note to end off on, but do you think that is something that's, I mean, Rypple had gamification aspects. Is it a worn out concept? Is it or are we going to see games expanding into all aspects of the enterprise?
I believe the game's going to expand.
Right.
If you will. I mean, this kind of the central pieces of that slide was
Right.
that there's gamification and there's pointsification, if you will.
Right.
So one of the ideas in the slide I wrote about gamification was that you need to have a core product or service or whatever that people intrinsically care about.
Right.
But you can amplify the impact by using gamification elements. So you can amplify effects using badges or points or leaderboards or that kind of stuff. You can't solve if you have a core problem with your software. You can't tack on gamification to solve it. So I think you have an entire generation, myself included, who've grown up on games, which have proven to be phenomenally great mechanisms to teach people and train people.
Right.
Think about games that you played recently, World of Warcraft.
Right.
Very highly complex games, and without an instruction manual, a new person thrown in the ecosystem can learn very quickly how to survive in the world, how to win in this world.
Right.
Right. So I think there's absolutely. I think there's massive potential for gamification to help solve lots of other problems.
Mm-hmm.
Code Academy is using gamification to teach people how to code. I think you're going to see more of that in education.
Right.
I think you're going to see more of that in the enterprise. But I don't think it's going to be. My hope is it's not as like out there and in your face. But I think elements of gamification, I think, absolutely are going to be part of it. It plays to human psychology, and that never changes.
Well, thank you for coming out this evening. Thank you, Rebecca, for having us all in here, and again, thank everybody for coming. There's lots of return visitors these days. Our next gig is on November 4th here. The guy's name is Michael Turpin. Michael was the founder of MarketWire, which is now owned by OMERS Capital. And he is the founder of a company called Social Radius, who was the PR agency behind the Will I Am video that came out during Obama's campaign. So he's quite an experienced digital promoter as well. And he is also the co-founder of BitAngels. BitAngels is an angel investor network that was established in May. And since then, they've attracted 200 angel investors globally and $25 million in commitments. And I think if I could ask you to do one thing when you leave tonight, is to send that invitation to the what we're calling the Digital Currency Challenge to somebody that that's part of the core finance, banking, and trading community in this town. Because we know that there are lots of people employed in these sort of core sectors of Toronto, and we'd love to see them getting more engaged with the startup community as angel investors and advisors and mentors. So if there was one thing I could ask you to do, it would be that. And George, thanks again.